This is the Cleveland Podcast.
Fred Talks.
Hello, Cleveland Podcast. This is your favorite mud monster, Fred. I decided to play that just because I thought it was cute. Today's Fred Talks episode, which is just me, again, I know, I'm sorry. We're still locked up due to the whole epidemic. But today's episode is about something that you may not know about. Did you know that the Underground Railroad had a huge part of it go through Ohio? And particularly, it went through numerous parts of Cleveland. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the parts of the Underground Railroad that you can still visit to this day and the historical significance of each part. Now, of course, you could say, well, it's the Underground Railroad. It helped fugitive slaves escape from pursuing slave hunters in the hope of getting to Canada, which you'd be right. But there's even additional information. And when you look at some of the places that these buildings are located in, you realize that there's even more historical significance to these buildings. In particular, there is a building that supposedly became the inspiration for one of America's greatest novels of all time, or at least one of its most well-known novels of all time. But let's begin. The information is courtesy of Only in Your State. According to this article, are 8 Underground Railroad locations around the Cleveland area. Now, warning, some of these locales are not necessarily 20 minutes away. Some of them are an hour away. But again, if you're interested in some of these facilities, some of these buildings, and you're interested in Civil War history or the history of slavery, then you should take a part in going to these various locations across the Cleveland area. On top of it, these buildings are located in places where you can make it an easy diversion to do something else and then add this Underground Railroad location on top of it. Again, this one will be a little bit of a shorter episode because we decided that maybe short might be best. Therefore, don't expect a hour-long conversation on this particular topic. Let's begin. The number one Underground Railroad location is the Cozad Bates House on 11508 Mayfield Road, Cleveland. You know what that means? It's right here in University Circle. That is definitely the wrong button. I don't know why I just clicked that, but oh well. Cozad Bates House. You can find that right in University Circle. It's right near one of my favorite locales to eat, which is the Euro Waffle. Then you can take a quick visit to the Cozad Bates House once things are a little bit more normal. You can go around, get some crepes, and then visit the Cozad Bates House. There's also the Cleveland Museum of Modern Art, or the MoCA, which is actually right on Mayfield Road, and it's a big, old, shiny, black obsidian-like building that you could check out, or you can even go to the Cleveland Museum of Art and then come back to the Cozad Bates House, however you want to approach it. The Cozad Bates House is a remarkable structure in University Circle. As noticeably the oldest, it's the only surviving pre-Civil War structure in its neighborhood, University Circle, which is where I live. University Circle was a region overflowing with abolitionists at the time, with the Cozad family, which, by the way, occupied most of the land that is University Circle to this day. Around the time, the Cozad family was very wealthy. In particular, they wanted to use the structures that they built in order to house runaway slaves. They became part of the Underground Railroad, which is, of course, really cool to think about that. The place that is now known for Case Western Reserve University was once a place where hundreds of runaway slaves came to freedom through this particular house. Which, by the way, if you don't know what it looks like, it's an old brick building. It has a green front, and then on top of it, it has like a green outline on top of the building, like a green roof. Basically, it's the one building that looks fairly old compared to the fairly modern buildings that surround this historic landmark. The Cozad family take a particular interest in assisting runaway slaves. Their stunning Italianate home must have provided plenty of places to hide. Yes, there are tons of little rooms inside this Italianate home. Okay, so a little more history on the Cozad Bates House, courtesy of University Circle Inc. You can check them out. Cozad Bates House is distinctive, and its history deserves a future. As the only pre-Civil War residential structure remaining within University Circle, built around 1853, is a rare surviving example of Italianate-influenced residential architecture, including a hipped roof, curved bay windows, paired eave brackets, and a prominent belvedere. The National Park Service listed the COVID Bates House on its registry in 1974, and the city of Cleveland made it a historic landmark in 2006. The home was saved from possible demolition by the Cleveland Restoration Society, Restore Cleveland Hope Inc., and University Circle Inc. in 2006. And the first steps to restore the house continue to this day. Donated to UCI by University Hospitals, the home is also reflective of Cleveland's anti-slavery era and legacy of abolition left by the settler families who built homes within University Circle and aided freedom seekers through Ohio's Underground Railroad network, which was known by the secret code name of Hope. The second location is Unionville Tavern in Madison. Some of you might be thinking, Madison, that's about 45 minutes away from the east side of Cleveland. That's a good distance away. You're right. It is a good distance away. However, this little particular tavern has a wonderful piece of history that you may not know. And this is the tavern where potentially one of America's most famous novels was created. The oldest parts of this structure date back to 1798, making it the oldest surviving tavern in Ohio. What is truly incredible about this structure, however, is its collection of stories that have taken place on the premises. Once upon a time, it was an active station on the Underground Railroad. From the tavern, the slaves would be taken to the Ellensburg docks, where they could taste freedom as they crossed the border to Canada. It is said that when Harriet Beecher Stowe lodged at the site, she heard the story of two fugitive slaves, Lewis and Milton Clark, that spoke at a nearby abolitionist rally. Milton was captured and beaten, but fortunately, local abolitionists freed him from his captors. The abolitionists then swore that no fugitive slaves would ever be captured again in Lake County. It is said that Stowe was inspired by Milton and based the character George Harris in Uncle Tom's Cabin after him. Now, this is not the whole Uncle Tom's Cabin, but a huge character in this story, and George Harris, was created in part due to this story that she personally witnessed, which is pretty amazing. And it's one of those things that became the inspiration for one of the most seminal characters in this book. That's pretty darn good history if you ask me. You can get a drink while also thinking about how Harriet Beecher Stowe created one of her famous characters due to the history of this tavern, which that's pretty good history. Number 3, Don's Pomeroy House in Strongsville. Some of you might be thinking, oh, that's a restaurant, right? You'd be right. You can get delicious food, a nice little formal sit down. If you want to get a little bit dressed up, a little bit fancy, you can go to Don Pomeroy's house, get yourself some nice food, and also get a little bit of history about how this was also a place in the Underground Railroad. The stunning building dates back to 1835 and has maintained a long history of welcoming guests. Though a restaurant today, it was once home to a family of abolitionists. The Justice of the Peace, Alanson Pomeroy, who built the house, would open it as a station on the Underground Railroad just a handful of years later. Runaway slaves would hide in the cellar, and they were often transported via a load of hay to a boat that would take them to Canada. Really cool stuff. By the way, this, if you're curious about getting a meal and also learning about the history of this building, you can check it out at 13664 Pearl Road, Strongsville. Again, that is 13664 Pearl Road, Strongsville. Next location is the Riders Inn on 792 Mentor Avenue, Painesville. You might be thinking, that is not kind of close to Madison? It is. So if you want to have a nice little diversion where you're going to both of them, or if you want to go to the beach and then take a nice detour all the way out over there, you can do that. You can see these various different buildings on just a quick little detour. It's not too crazy, although you have to go a little bit out of your way. If you want to really learn about this history, you certainly can, and is certainly accessible. The Riders Inn. The stunning structure looks exactly like the kind of place you'd expect to find a mystery or two, and that is thanks in part to a long history that dates back to 1812. It's also partly because this site was seemingly involved in every early social movement, operating as a safe haven on the Underground Railroad and even a speakeasy during Prohibition. This stagecoach stop must have had plenty of places where fugitives could stow away. Number 5, the Hubbard House, Underground Railroad Museum, Lake Avenue and Walnut Boulevard, Ashtabula. Now, this one's a little bit farther away. This is by far perhaps the most out of the way than anything else, but if you're traveling from Erie, you might want to make a quick stop, a little detour at Ashtabula if you have some time. Again, this is the Hubbard House Underground Railroad Museum, Lake Avenue and Walnut Boulevard in Ashtabula. This home-turned-museum is just like any other early 1840s home, and that made it an unsuspecting site on the Underground Railroad. William Hubbard and his family moved to the area and became involved with the Ashtabula County Anti-Slavery Society. William's brothers had already been active in the area, and they had jointly helped establish the abolitionist periodical Ashtabula Centennial. William, eager to help out, established his homestead as a station on the Underground Railroad. Eyewitness reports from the era explain that fugitives visited the homestead all day and night seeking help, and the Hubbards were always welcoming and willing. Since the house is so close to Lake Erie, this was a final stop for many slaves before they finally made their gateway to Canada and found their freedom. Pretty cool stuff. The next location is St. John's Episcopal Church, 2600 Church Street, Cleveland. Finally, a location in Cleveland. Thank goodness. This is the second one on the list. The stunning structure, which dates back to the 1830s, is considered to be the oldest consecrated church in Cuyahoga County. According to local legend, runaway slaves hid in the bell tower and awaited signals from the lake, alluring them to a safe passage. The Episcopal Church, however, did not split between northern and southern issues. It simply stayed out of the conflict. So one must wonder what a member of this congregation opened the church to refugees. Soon after the Civil War concluded, the wooden interior of the church was largely destroyed by a fire. Pretty interesting stuff. You can visit that church today, go to church, and then also ask a little bit about the history. The next location on this list is Spring Hill Historic Home, 1401 Spring Hill Lane, Northeast, Massillon. Now, that's a little bit far out of the way as well, but if you're close to the area, this stunning structure is unlike any other in the area, and its standout architecture and special events make it a site of congregation to this day. This charming site was built in 1821 for a Quaker couple that was known to be active on the Underground Railroad. The Roch family hid slaves in the basement of the kitchen and in the second story. Despite attempts, no slaves were ever captured during their stay at Spring Hill. And then lastly, number 8, the Rush R. Sloan House, 403 East Adams Street, Sandusky. Isn't Cedar Point near Sandusky? Maybe you could take the kids out to Sandusky or take yourself and friends out to Cedar Point, and then you can take a weird, boring, historic detour to this house, which looks dilapidated. It's a little bit rough, but it still looks interesting. The Rush R. Sloan House is gorgeous, even though I just called it dilapidated. That's this website's quote, not mine. Even in this picture as it looked prior to its restoration, it's yellow now. When Sloan purchased the house in 1854, it was already a few years old. While in Sandusky, Sloan studied law and frequently worked with abolitionist lawyer F.D. Parrish. In one of Sloan's more daring abolitionist acts, he challenged local law enforcement after they arrested fugitive slaves at the demands of men claiming to be their owners. Law enforcement sided with Sloan, and they let the fugitives go. When one of the men displayed ownership papers, Sloan was tried in court and fined $3,000 plus $1,330.30 in court and attorney fees. Long after the Civil War concluded, and after this picturesque home was used as a station on the Underground Railroad, Sloan was elected mayor of Sandusky in 1879. That's pretty darn cool. Think about the fact that you can go to the water parks and then get a little bit of a history lesson, if you're into that type of thing. Spring Hill Historic Home is closed for walk-in tours, naturally due to the virus. We will reopen for the holiday season starting Thanksgiving weekend, and there's all types of other wonderful things that are on this website, but check out springhillhistorichome.org. Finally, I would like to mention that I forgot some of the addresses for these locations, and I want to bring them up again. So I'm going to repeat all these locations, so that way you guys will have them in order to explore. That way you won't be wandering around aimlessly and get lost. I know I already mentioned this address, but the first address for the first location, which is the Cozad Bates House, is 11508 Mayfield Road. Again, you can go around, you can go to Cleveland Museum of Art. then you can even get crepes after. Shout out to Razi, the owner of the location and a good friend of mine. Again, Don's Pomeroy House is 13664 Pearl Road in Strongsville. The Riders Inn is 792 Mentor Avenue, Paynesville. Then the Hubbard House Underground Railroad Museum is on Lake Avenue in Walnut Boulevard of Ashtabula, Ohio. St. John's Episcopal Church, 2600 Church Street, Cleveland. Spring Hill Historic Home, 1401 Spring Hill Lane, Northeast. Then lastly, the Rush R. Sloan House, 403 East Adams Street, Sandusky, Ohio. Now, there is some additional Underground Railroad history, which I will be covering in a future episode, but I just wanted to bring up these cool, weird, historic places that you can find all around Cleveland. Cleveland's not just the Browns and the Cavs and sports, which, of course, the sports are very nice, and I like the sports teams, even though I'm a Ravens fan. The important thing is, really look into the local history. See what you can find. See what you can discover, because there's all types of crazy little historic buildings that we've covered in interviews. And on top of it, we're covering these other weird historic landmarks and historic facts of Cleveland because we really need it now more than ever. I feel like during this crisis with the coronavirus, we need to hear these interesting little tidbits and facts as a means to have a better understanding of the community around us, have a better love for it, and then come together even better than before. Thank you, everyone, to all of our listeners. Go around and explore the Underground Railroad, and we will see you on another episode. Later.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can find us online at facebook.com/The Cleveland Podcast, or get links to all of our various different social media pages at theclevelandpodcast.com. Our episode notes for this and other episodes can be found in the photo albums on our Facebook page. You can follow along as you listen, as well as learn more from our sources about the subjects that we cover. You can also find links on our website to our YouTube channel, Spreaker, Google Play, Apple iTunes, Spotify, and more. Leave us a voicemail at 216-200-7940. Send us an email at theclevelandpodcast@gmail.com, or interact with us on Reddit, Facebook, or Twitter. We'd love to use your comments, ideas, and feedback in the show. We are a community-based podcast, so the more community interaction, the better. Have a great day, Cleveland.